All right. So I had a question come in recently, and I'm going to try to find that thing right now. Let's see here. I just got to find the right page. And I should probably shut off notifications so this phone don't start ringing through the computer. We'll do night shift plus do not disturb. Usually that's semi-safe. All right. So let's see here. Where is that thing? All right, let's see. Let me try again here. There we go. I found it. So here is the question. It's from Denise. She asked if I could tag her in this. I'm not sure if I can, but I'll try it. Let's see. Hey, I think I did. There's a tag Rooney. All right, so it says, "Hey Jeff, my sweet boy Weimaraner, 1 year, 3 months old, is incredibly smart. Picks up on new commands almost immediately. He knows come and will obey when there are no real distractions, for example, on a hiking trail. If, however, there is something he'd rather do/see, or especially if he's stolen something, our little speaker one night by a bonfire, for example, he doesn't listen. I know he knows what I want him to do. Once I'm sure he understands commands like come or leave it or stay, how do I get him to listen 100% of the time?" And then there is a picture of him with the speaker, which is oh so cute. I'm not sure if I can screen share this thing or not, but I would like to show that picture. Oh, it's cute. It's got a speaker and doesn't want to come. All right, boys and girls. There's somebody here, CA. Hi, CA. How are you doing? So when you're looking at something like this come command, for instance, Denise, I want you to think back to when you were a kid. And was there ever a time you knew what you were being asked to do and then simply chose the opposite? So this would be if your parents said to come inside, or your guardian, whatever, and you heard them but didn't really come. Or if you knew to come home at a certain time, but did not actually come home during that time. Or you were told to get ready for school and did not actually get ready for school. Instead, you laid in the bed till somebody woke you up. But if there's ever a moment in your life where you knew to do something but then did the opposite, I want you to think back to that moment. And then I want you to realize how that translates exactly into the situation you're describing. So I've talked to many, many people, more than I would ever dream of trying to count when it comes to this dog training stuff, because I've been training dogs since 2005. So in all my years doing this, it's very rare I stumble across someone that says, "Hey, you know what? I always listened. I knew what my parents were saying. I always did what my parents asked. I always did what my teachers asked." And most of the time, those people turned out to be judges, or they chose that something like that as an occupation. Where most children and dogs, they could know exactly what you want them to do, but will do the opposite because it's fun. And so children often, when you ask them to come, they know what you're asking, but they choose to run from you because it's fun for them to be caught as you chase them through the house as they're trying to get ready. Now, are there ways you can improve upon this? Yes. But the general way dogs and people operate is as soon as you give them something to do, they typically want to go and do the opposite, because nobody, at least most people and dogs, they don't want to be told what to do, or at least not by anyone. And if they're going to listen, it's got to be for a really good reason. It has to make sense for them. They have to have motivation and drive to do a certain behavior. We all do certain behaviors because we have reasons for those behaviors, some good, some bad, whatever, all left up to interpretation. So when you're looking at trying to get your dog to come 100% of the time, first I want you to think, well, how do you get a child to listen 100% of the time? And are there certain things that children will listen to 100% of the time? Yes, probably the things that the parents or guardians really instilled upon them to listen, like maybe washing their hands, or maybe making their bed in the morning, or maybe putting their shoes on the right feet. There's certain things that they learn and they have motivation for doing it, and then they'll continue to do it. Other times in life, the children might do it for the parents, but then when they grow up, actually revolt and not want to do it at all when they experience that freedom. So when you're looking at getting your dog to do it 100% of the time, what you need to do is stack motivation of why to do it. That's phase one, because there's only really two motivators in life: to gain something that you want, or to get rid of or escape something you don't want. So, do you want to pull your car over if there's an officer behind you with the lights on? Well, I hope so. I hope you'd want to obey the law. But even though you're doing it, you might be apprehensive. You might not necessarily want to do it, or maybe saw a bad movie where it was a pretend cop that pulled someone over, some sort of horror scene, whatever. So maybe you're a little suspect. You're like, was I really breaking the law? Why is this person pulling me over? Most aren't so reluctant that they don't pull over. And enough people have seen what happens on the news or in the movies to not have to experience that themselves. So most humans are pretty obedient when it comes to that side of the law, unless you've broken the law, in which case maybe you're trying to evade or elude the ones whose lights are on behind you. Not a good idea. So here's the idea. There's also what most people are missing, which is the, hey, you can't do that side of it, or the reason why not to not listen. So there's plenty of reasons to listen that the dog has, but those reasons don't stack up against what you're describing as distractions, such as the squirrels or whatever, or just the pure pleasure and fun and freedom to steal the speaker and run. So where most people make the mistake is they give the dog way too much freedom and then try to retract upon that freedom. And that doesn't really work, as you can tell. So yes, your dog may come when he or she wants to, but your dog might not come if they don't want to. So how can you make them want to more? There's no magic dog training like wand you can wave that just magically makes them want to come to you more than the other things. But that's where training can come in and really help and benefit you. So imagine if your dog was on a leash and your dog went to steal the speaker, and your dog took the speaker and you said, come, and your dog's like, yeah, I don't really want to. Well, you could essentially gently reel your dog in. And then when your dog gets there, you could praise your dog like your dog did it on their own. And that would give you a lot more positive results than the pleasure your dog's receiving from stealing the speaker, running, you saying come, and your dog not listening. So let's throw out a real tangible something for everyone real quick, which is this. You don't want to give commands you can't follow through until you trust your dog beyond the shadow of a doubt that they will. And then if they break your heart or let you down, you're not going to want to do that again. Right? It's just like humans that break each other's trust. It could be easily earned, but once broken, it could be very hard to get back. So same is true when training your dog. Yeah, you can give them all the trust in the world, right? I see people do this all the time. Oh yeah, my puppy's off leash. No, it never runs away. Yep, it always comes when I call them. And I go, yeah, but your puppy's like, 8 weeks old, 9 weeks old. Of course, like your puppy doesn't feel secure enough yet to go out there and venture in the world. Maybe it's on an alpha dog or a number 2 or 3. Maybe it's like a 4 or 5 in that pack, and it feels much more secure being under control. But I often tell people, look, there's a time where your puppy might get a little more confidence and decide to venture off and see what happens if it just doesn't listen. And if you're too loosey-goosey about it, that could be the last day you see your pup. Why? Because there's traffic. There's other animals. There's other people who don't leash their dogs, and their dogs are running around out of control that might start a fight or bite your dog. And if it's a puppy, they might not last too well in that. So when it comes to dog training, it's really about how much do you love that dog and how much you're willing to risk when it comes to trying to give them freedoms when the freedoms could potentially hurt them. So that's where the trust factor kicks in. So if somebody started by having their dog on the leash, and when they called their dog come, if the dog bucked against the system, they were able to interrupt, disrupt, and then recreate or reconstruct like a whole new concept for the dog, which is, hey, come doesn't mean run, come means come. Even if your brain is telling you, oh, it'd be much better not to come right now. When you interrupt that, then the dog doesn't start to think that as an option. So the reason most people don't wake out of bed, jump out the window, and try to fly is they don't think that's an option. And I'm not recommending you try that. But what I am saying is the things that you think are doable, you will try. And if it works, you might persist and continue to do them. If it doesn't work, you might persist and continue for a while. But most humans, not all, but most will give up after a certain time if they're not achieving their results, which is why when you look at someone like Edison and it comes to him inventing this little light bulb thing, some say it was 10,000 plus failures before he achieved his success. And so oftentimes from a behavioral standpoint, it's been said, if you show the dog one time, it can be done, such as disobedience, before you try to create obedience, or show them there's the possibility of not listening and then try to fix it. You could be looking at 4,000 attempts of trying to go back to the old way. And if you look at human psychological patterns, it doesn't take but winning the lotto or some sort of thing once, and then the brain will push you. Well, if you did it once, you could do it again. Oh, no, I lost. Well, no big deal. No, it must have been a fluke. I'm sure I could win next time. Oh, I lost. And before you know it, you've given up all your possessions to the casino. So the same way that human brain gets addicted to winning is the same way the dog's brain gets addicted to winning or beating the system when you give a command and they know they don't have to listen. So when you look at, again, behavior from a behavioral, just through that lens, okay, throwing every other part out of there, whether you like it, dislike it, morality, all that, just from the lens of this is how our world kind of works, sort of ish. When it comes to elephants, when you take that elephant and it's a baby and you tie it around this little pole, the elephant could, pull the pole out. No, the pole's too big for the baby elephant. Now, a big elephant, takes that sucker right out, or the steak, whatever you want to call it. So here, the baby elephant tries. It doesn't work. My light just died. That must mean I've been on for a while. Let's switch the light up real quick. Slow without dropping the camera, hopefully, off the little table here. Okay, we got lights. We even got ones that plug in. There we go. Okay. All right. So when this elephant's tied up and it tries to get away and then it can't, eventually it stops trying. And then as an adult, because it's tried so much in the past and it failed, it just gave up. So even though it could as an adult, it never realizes that because it hasn't tried since a child. So for your dog, if from puppyhood it tries running away and it can't because you got it on a leash and it keeps learning it can't, and you reduce the size of the leash and keep it sneaker about it, it's possible to achieve the same sort of result-ish. Or if you pair it with something especially, so in this case, the elephant's paired with the rope around the pole or whatever, which represents, hey, you don't leave it. Here, when you're trying to wean the dog off the leash, you might want something that represents the leash, even if you're holding the leash and it's non-attached to the dog. Again, this is further down the road. But most people do the exact opposite, where they just let this dog go running wild and they call it and it might come, might not. It comes sometimes. They give it cookies, whatever. But there's no real consequence for not coming other than you don't have to come. So what is that creating in your dog's brain? Because like a human brain, okay, it works very similarly where it's learning, right? It's processing bits of info. It's filtering info. And there's some sort, I would say, I couldn't say for all certainty, but I would say with some certainty that it works so far like our brain that even in the subconscious level, even when it comes to like dreaming, as dogs dream, there's some sort of similarities there too. So how far does it go? I'm not really sure, but I can tell you this from having worked with dogs and having worked with a bunch of humans and having worked with these humans' children and having 4 children of my own, I can clearly see that the way the brain works for the dog is so similar to the human, but most humans think because it's a dog, it should just do it because it's had some training, or because dogs are trained, that there's some sort of secret out there that'll just make the dog do it after telling it once. It'll just come forever 100% of the time, all the time. Well, no, they're smart beings. So like, let's say you trained your dog to ignore chickens and ignore squirrels, and you trained your dog to ignore, other dogs. Well, what if there was, just loosey-goosey here. Let's say like, comically, here comes, Spaceman X or like Spaceman Spiff, or like, all of a sudden Marvin the Martian pops up. Your dog might not respond because you haven't necessarily trained for that. Now, dogs can generalize like people generalize. And if you don't understand what that term means, it means if I, for instance, step outside on my grass and I'm allergic to that grass, I might think that I'm allergic to all grass, where maybe it's just the grass in my yard. It's not actually the grass I'm allergic to, but it has some sort of substance from the fertilizer or whatever that I'm allergic to. You get the idea. So your dog could generalize eventually to listen in all situations and circumstances. Wouldn't that be nice? But most of the time you have to train for these new situations and circumstances, and most people negate that, and they don't actually desensitize their dog to these situations. And they say, oh, well, because my dog comes for this, why wouldn't my dog come in that situation? Well, it's completely different. To your dog, there's plenty of reasons not to come in that moment. They don't want to lose the freedom. They don't want to lose their opportunity to gain pleasure by doing the bad behavior, running around with your speaker, for instance, in the case of Denise. But, to really get a dog to listen 100% of the time, you better be 100% committed. That means every time you give a command, you better be able to follow through until you trust your dog beyond a shadow of a doubt, and you're willing to sign over, 99.9% of your soul on it, or your house, or something of significant value, right? Right? I mean, if not, can you trust a human 100% of the time? I hope so. But most humans have experienced that not to be the case. Geez. So even in the nutrition thing, like, can you trust the labels 100% of the time, or can you trust the facts 100% of the time, or every now and again, every couple 100 years, or 50 years or 20 years or whatever, or 10 years or 1 year, something's recalled, and you hear that thing on the news or the radio or whatever, and they're like, if you've consumed this product on such and such a date, you might be entitled to $50 million gazillion because you probably have such and such X problems from product. It's like, but oftentimes these products were like highly, highly trusted, just like dog food. Dog food's highly, highly trusted until recalled. So when it comes to building this trust with your dog, yeah, they're highly trusted till they don't come, and then you better rethink things about showing them again that they don't have to listen, because most people do that repeatedly. They ask their dog to come, their dog doesn't, and then they just keep asking their dog to come as it doesn't, and then they're chasing their dog as they're calling their dog, which is just further instilling upon the dog these words are meaningless. Other than, don't listen, or you don't have to listen. So I take a different approach. Okay, let's get on a funner, lighter side of this, because we could really get into depth, but there's no reason to at the moment, because I don't know, who's necessarily thinking what, asking what questions. So as we get through it, we'll lighten things up, and just know that it is a serious matter, though, but we'll lighten it up. All right, so motivation-wise, most people are trying to lure their dogs away from things, which is really okay if that's all you got in your tool belt, but that really doesn't ultimately create a dog that listens, in my opinion, because you're stuck with the lure. Your dog's never really paying attention until it catches that scent of the food or the visual. So what I want you to do is this, or in some cases the touch could be enough if they associate that with it. But anyhow, because when it comes to training, you're really just manipulating the five senses of your dog, and one of those five senses being stimulated with a certain stimulus, let's say, would then produce a desired behavior, right? Or most of the time it's the undesired behavior, and that's what we're trying to fix. So let's say it's the smell of the food, okay? So we're using the dog sense smell, and the stimulus being the food produces the desired effect of having your dog follow and pay attention. But what I'd much rather do is create a verbal or a visual cue or a touch cue from your dog that will equal or produce the same thing. So in this scenario, imagine, you got the speaker, here's your dog tries to steal it. Your dog gets the end of the leash, you say, come, your dog doesn't want to, your dog goes for the speaker, you say no, you give a little tug of the leash, and then you loosen it up. So you're giving your dog the option to either come or run and get the speaker. Where most people leave the leash so tight, the dog has no option but to basically do what the person's asking. But you really want your dog to choose, okay? Because every time your dog chooses it, it's going to create a much stronger connection in their brain because it was their choice. And just like when it's your choice, it feels better, right? So if you're arguing, calmly debating with someone you love, friend, significant other, whatever, family member, whatever, and they're right, and it is in your best interest, most humans still feel a little bit like, I wish I was right. I still kind of want to do it my way. Most, not all. There's a percentage of us out there. I think I'm included in that slightly. Working on that still. But it's like, gosh darn it, I wish it was my idea. Anyhow, so for your dog, if it's their idea, they're much more likely to do it. Okay? So we're limiting options here. So they can choose to try to get the thing or run away, but they can't really get far and it's not really working. Or they can come. It's another choice, in which case they'll get lavish praise and love and, whatever. But they got to make that choice. So instead of you luring them away, you're like detouring them away. Detouring. They're taking a detour to get there. But it's like they want to get to the shoe. They can't get there, right? So you could want to go down the road you want to go down all you want, but if that thing's got a sign that says road closed, detour, you could try. You probably won't be very successful unless you got a little doom buggy or a little go-go gadget thing, that'll get you across. But most of the time, you got to take the detour. So in this case, your dog's going to try to go down the road they want, which is direct path to either not listen or get to the speaker. But when they can't, because the road's closed, as long as you give them the option, and they choose the right option, which is coming to you, because there's several other options they can go to as well that's not you, right? Just like when you don't have to take the prescribed method during the detour, there's other ways to get there typically. Some are better than others, right? So when your dog does get to you, you want to make a pretty big deal about it, okay? Some will say the absence of correction is praise. Okay, I could agree with that to some extent, but guess what? Real praise is praise too. So the more you can establish like this was great, this was a good reason to come, the more likely your dog will be to do it. Okay, let me ask you this. Why don't stores have people outside all day, every day with lines backed up, with people trying to get into Best Buys or people trying to get into, I don't know, the Walmarts of the world? I mean, or the movies, for instance, or whatever. And mind you, when things were closed during the pandemic, I get it. But as things started opening back up, there might have been some lines at first, but then the lines quickly dissipate. Same thing like a brand new restaurant. There might be some lines, there might be some waiting. But why isn't it every day, right? I mean, maybe some parts of the world, but where we live, you might have a wait on Mother's Day. You might have a wait, on certain holidays or maybe on the weekends. But typically, if you want to go to a restaurant on like noon on a Monday or Tuesday, if it's not a holiday, it's not an issue. You're going to get a seat, you're going to get served. In fact, most of the time, it's going to be relatively empty, even at the bigger fast food chains or restaurant chains, whatever. Why is that? Because there's not as much motivation or drive to go, right? There's not as much supply and demand to make that choice. So on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, when people are racing to buy stuff, it's like, wow, there's limited supply. We want this deal, right? So if you could create every time you call your dog to be like a Black Friday, or for it to be like a Cyber Monday, or for them to get like this awesome deal, right? Or it to be limited supply of your love, and it comes when you call them, and that's the moment to take action. You will start to train and rewire the brain to function in the way you want it to, right? Boy, we sound like control freaks when it comes to this dog training stuff, doesn't it? Jeez, oh my. But with being your dog's parent, you do want to be in control of your animal. It shouldn't be wild, by the way. They've been domesticated, but they can act pretty wild if you don't train them. So when it comes to there's a whole lot that goes into this. But again, if you want your dog, your child, your husband, your wife, I don't know, anything, your business partner, I don't know, to listen 100% of the time, that's a pretty wild expectation. It's maybe for the dog, you could do it. For humans, that's pretty tough, huh? Wild expectation there, isn't it? But for the dog, I'd say if you're 100% committed, you definitely get there, but I don't think they'll listen 100% of the time. I think what happens is when you see there start to be a slippage, or if you're not training enough and you notice that it's starting to backfire and go the other way, or there's like a decreased response time, you can tighten up and fix that. But I wouldn't say just because they've been trained once, they'll listen 100% of the time. I think if you put in 100% effort 100% of the time, you can definitely start to achieve close to that, if not hit that. But there's certain things that'll throw it off. So if you look at protection dogs that have had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of training, and you throw in a little bit of a, scent of a female in heat, sometimes that's just going to throw it off. Same thing at a dog show. It's like all these dogs are trained to perform so well, but why don't they allow females in heat in there? Because sometimes the dogs don't listen so well in that situation. Now, could you train for that? Sure. Are you fighting Mother Nature? Yeah. You pretty much are at all times when you're fighting the nature of your dog to do one behavior and trying to switch it to something else, or your child. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So that's why, again, I say throw the morality question out temporarily and first focus on behaviorally, just what is the reality behind behavior and how does behavior work? Well, if you're motivated for something, you're going to make that choice. Right? Whether that motivation is from the gaining or the escaping of something you don't want, right? Most people, when it comes to tax season, aren't necessarily excited to pay the taxes. Some are, but not everyone's like, I can't wait. But the motivation there might be, I don't want the penalty of what happens if you don't. So there's certain human behavior, certain human things we do because it's escaping the negative more so than getting the positive. But in general, most humans, if you look at the two sides, most of us are more motivated by escaping the pain than gaining pleasure, believe it or not. Now, if you're a human that's motivated by gaining pleasure more so than escaping pain, you might not understand this or be able to relate. But at least from what I understand from collectively as society and statistics reported as a whole, from what I've heard across the board, is most of us are hardwired more so on the side of escaping the pain. That's why we would do something more so than gaining the pleasure, because if the gaining the pleasure thing is tough and there's something tough about it, most of us will be, well, I don't need that pleasure that bad. But as soon as the pain starts to get bad enough, it's like, well, I'm going to have to change instantly right now. So when you look at dogs as a whole, when you're trying to do it from a positive reinforcement only standpoint, you really better have a very clever way to not let them into that world of, wow, it's fun to misbehave, very similar to the elephant that was tied up. But I don't know how positive that would be, tying them up and not letting them do what they want. I don't know. Again, it's all questionable, right? So if anyone has questions about this in more detail, I know it's kind of a little out there, but to understand behavior and to really get a grasp of what you're asking and how to create it, and is it even worth your time and effort, is to really understand and grasp this behavior stuff. So the reason there's leash laws in a lot of areas is because, even these dogs that were trained so well will occasionally disobey. And when that happens, it's bad enough that there's laws to protect people against it. Because in all cases, someone will be like, oh, yeah, well, my dog's never bit before. Oh, no, my dog's never done that. My dog's always came. No, that's the first time they ran away. Yep. You get what I'm saying? All right, boys and girls. Well, I missed everyone last night. I'm like, I'm going to go live after my baby goes to bed, and I ended up going to bed before she did. And thankfully, her mother put her away. All right. So Charlotte said unexpected surprises are always around the corner, and that's true. You know, I've had a lot of clients that will tell me and report to me, look, you know, I was out walking my dog, and out of nowhere, here come this dog, and this attacked my dog. And I had no, you know, I jumped on top, tried to say, the dog bit me, and it bit my dog, and I had to go to the vet for my dog, and I had to go to the hospital for me, and it was a disaster, and we had to go to court, and it's like, whoa, and all these unexpecteds. So, you know, unexpected can happen all the time. Like your leash could accidentally slip from your hand if you're not careful. The leash could unclip from the collar if you're not careful. The collar could slip over your dog's head, and magically your dog is free. So the come command I find to be one of the most important. Now, one thing I'll say here too is anything new is cool. The majority of marketing is advertised to you as a new concept or product, even if it's been around for thousands of years. They just found a spin on that to make it seem fresh or new. There was a time when it came to beer where no one talked about it being filtered, right? And suddenly these marketers are like, look, let's talk about how it's distilled and how many times it's filtered. And they're like, but they're like, no one's talking about it. So it was a new concept, and it hit, and it changed things. And then everyone started using it, and then it got dull, and then they had to find new ways to push it, but so on and so forth. So when it comes to your training, you want to keep it fresh, fun, exciting, bring the newness to that come command so that every time you call your dog, right, they want to see what happens when they get there next. Not, ooh, coming right now? Ooh, no, couldn't do that. And so what would make you come over something else? Like if there were two places you could go, you'd go to one or go to the other, and they're both calling your name and they want you to come there. Why would you choose one over the other? Well, because you wanted the one more than the other, period. And so that's why your dog don't listen now. So in order to fix that, you have to build reasons and motivations and desires for them to want to choose you more so than the other one, in a nutshell. All right? All right, boys and girls, I am going to move on, as one of my college professors would say. All right, have a good one for now, and I will talk to you real soon. Remember, happy training. And when your dog makes mistakes, just remember the last mistake you made and then let up. Be easy on that dog, okay? Humans make mistakes all the time, right? Unless we're talking about you. You're perfect, I'm sure. You never made a mistake, right? You in particular. But everybody else, you know what I'm talking about. So go easy on your dog, and just remember, if there's a possibility to be bad or have fun doing the wrong thing, they'll do that. So you really want to limit that potential possibility of them learning it's fun not to listen. Leashes work wonders there. All right, we'll talk more later. Scott said, see you, Scott. I will see you Thursday, my friend, if not before, and then we'll hang out and talk after class. I'll keep that fresh in my head, so I make sure I drink a extra healthy energy drink there so I don't end up falling asleep like I did last night. Okay, all right. Ciao for now. That's funny because it's a dog breed. Chow. Get it? I said chow. That's funny.